bell. Sorry. Oops. Okay. Goodness, I have to record in an odd way or it won't upload, as I discovered at 9:30 at night. But you know what? It's okay. So welcome to week 5. This is Spiritual Journeys Part 1, Johnathan Edwards, a personal narrative. The genre is an autobiography, and specifically it's a spiritual autobiography, where a person writes their personal story of how they came to faith. This is usually found in Protestant Christians tend to write these, especially from the 17th century. That's where it was kind of invented, the genre. So spiritual autobiographies, this is a wonderful, helpful chart. Credit to Miss Holloway, of course. You can find this in the annotation guide. This is just helpful, just to visualize what you're reading. A lot of this, as you will soon see, a lot of the things, stages overlap one another, but that's okay. So the summary. So pages 1 through 3 is the introduction, but I'm not covering the introduction. But pages 4 through 5, it tells of Johnathan Edwards' childhood. His fear of condemnation and struggle with God's sovereignty. It also discusses his first 2 spiritual awakenings, as he said, one as a child and then one in college. So as he struggling with God's sovereignty really is him having a hard time grasping if God was good, even though he in his view predestined people, which we will discuss later. So pages 6 through 7, he begins to take delight in the Bible and the ideas of God and creation. Creation meaning, the nature. Pages 8 through 10, he begins longing for things not of this earth and contemplates holiness. And pages 11 through 12 admits he is horrified at his wickedness and rejoices in God's grace. Also, I forgot to mention, he also writes about his desire to be more humble. Okay, so this, as you can see, a lot of the stages overlap. So pages 1 through 2, he writes he had 2 spiritual awakenings, as I said, and then, I won't read it all. You can read it yourself, sorry. So, but interestingly, I want to talk about the conversion experience. He doesn't record one. Personally, I think it's because he grew up always knowing God, if that makes sense, and I feel like he alluded always having a personal relationship with Christ, but, struggling. I feel like the story that he wrote is more of like a sanctification process. But yeah. So the cultural context. So this was written in the 1700s, and also, which was during the Great Awakening, which we will soon discuss. But I want to define Puritanism as Johnathan Edwards was a Puritan. So it began in the late 16th century within the Church of England. So those within the movement believed it was important for an individual to have a personal relationship with God, meaning you can't go through someone else. Your parents, you don't inherit salvation pretty much, or, you don't go to a priest. It's fine, and an individual should live a life marked by purity in all aspects. And doctrine of predestination, it's Calvinism, states that God is sovereign and that God determines beforehand those who will be saved and not. If you have more question on Puritans, the source will be in the cited sources. So there are 2 characters, Johnathan Edwards and the Christian God, the triune God. So now the biography part. He was a Puritan pastor and theologian. He was a key leader in the First Awakening, and he is most famous for a sermon titled Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And the picture is from the text that y'all will be reading from. So Johnathan Edwards was born October 5th to a family from a long line of pastors. His father was a pastor if I recall correctly, and his maternal grandfather was a pastor, so he just was surrounded by that. And he was born in Connecticut, East Windsor. He began attending Yale at age 13 and became a pastor at age 18. He spent most of his service in ministry at a church in Northampton, which was in Massachusetts. I can't ever say Massachusetts correctly. I'm terribly sorry. Which is actually where his maternal grandfather was the pastor, and he took over for him. So he was unfortunately fired in 1750 from the Church of Northampton after serving there for 10 plus years, more than 10 plus 20, something along those lines. I can't remember on top of my head right now. I can't find my notes. So he was fired, and then, but because he asked for higher salary, because he had 11 children, and they said no and fired him. I mean, it was deeper than that too, but he began ministering to Native Americans later that year, and then 8 years later, he became the president of Princeton University, then called the College of New Jersey, on February 16th, but unfortunately he died a month later after receiving a smallpox and I can never say this right, but that word. So the first Great Awakening, the second, there's two, of course. So this is from not essay, but from a website. So it was a religious piety swept through America colonies between the 1730s and 40s. It is debated by historians how long it lasted. Some say it ended in the 1750s or the 1770s, but that really does not matter. So the first Great Awakening began with the Presbyterians in the northern colonies, but quickly spread south to the Puritans and the Baptists. And it actually had a huge effect even to the United Kingdom. The three most influential men during the Great Awakening was Gilbert Tennant, looking at my notes, he was a Presbyterian, Johnathan Edwards, our guy, a Puritan, and George Whitefield, an Anglican. So now I'm to discuss themes. So the two themes that really stood out to me most was sanctification, which means to be set apart, to become holy, and to become more like God in a Christian sense. And it takes place after salvation, which is accepting Christ as your Lord. And then, so another theme I found was his delight in the Lord. I will get to it. Sorry. So sanctification. So as you will read, Johnathan Edwards really struggled with a resentment towards God, with, what he believed as he grew up in a Puritan culture, the doctrine of predestination, and had a very hard time believing that he was, good. But over time, his heart softened, and, he, as you can see, it says to seek salvation. And also this is, I feel like, applies to the sanctification theme. The first instant that I remember of the sort of an inward sweet delight in God and divine things that I have lived much in since, sanctification, as he recognizes it's not him, but it's God who works through him. So also, the other theme is his sheer delight in the Lord. So let me read this passage. After this, my sense of divine things gradually increased and became more and more lively, and had more of that inward sweetness. The appearance of everything that was altered there seemed to be, as it were, a calm, sweet cast or appearance of divine glory in almost everything. So the sun, moon, stars, and it goes on and on. I don't have to read all of that. So Johnathan Edwards begins to take delight in the Bible. As you will read, he loves these certain Bible verses and creation. That is, again, nature, as you can see through this passage, and the sheer mercy of God, as he writes. And he admits that it's only by God's grace that he can be this way. So, yeah. So he truly took delight in everything. So here, discuss literary devices. So I noticed there was more than that, but these are the ones that stood out to me. Similes, personification, metaphors, and illusion. I just want to clear something up. So like a metaphor is versus simile. I get them confused. So a metaphor is a direct comparison, and then a simile uses direct comparison, but it uses as or like those terms. So like an example of a simile would be busy as a bee, and a metaphor, the world is the stage. So again, this is a simile right here. As you can see, it uses the word like, cluing us into that it is indeed a simile. As you can see, I wrote a conceit, which is just basically a very long metaphor or simile. So the soul of a true Christian, as I then wrote my meditations, appeared like such as a little flower as we see in the spring of the years. He's discussing comparing a soul to a flower, clearly, as you can see, a Christian soul, that is, how it becomes more beautiful over time, and so another literary devices was personification, metaphors, and illusions. So he, right here, as you can see, the green underline, and hear the majestic and awful voice of God's thunder. So, oh goodness, sorry. A metaphor, he's not saying God's voice was like thunder, voice of awful voice of God's thunder, more of a metaphor. And also this passage is an allusion, especially to different Bible passages. Specifically, what stood out to me was Psalms. Here I have a verse. It says, "The voice of thunder is in the sphere. Lightnings have lighted the world, and the earth trembles, indeed shakes." So I felt like that was I felt like he was alluding to that. But yes, let's see what's next. Oh, and here are the cited sources that I used, and of course I used the book. Discussion questions. What other literary themes did you notice while reading? I noticed a few, couldn't do them all, be here all day. Which section of text caught your attention after reading it, and why? I'm curious. So thank you everyone, and I'm terribly sorry. I'm a nervous wreck. But thanks. Bye. Hope you enjoy your reading. Oh goodness, no!